Well, the Tomb Raider Remastered trilogy is finally here on Nintendo Switch, and before our full review, you've got this nice little preview that's going to talk about the performance and some of the major changes that you're going to see in the game. We'll also go over frame rates and how it performs in both docked and handheld mode on the Nintendo Switch version. This is actually going to be very useful if you're just going to pick up the game and think that it's going to be the game you remembered, because actually I think there's quite a few details that would certainly be beneficial to know before you actually play. Alright, my name's Marc Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Is the Tomb Raider Remastered experience a rounded one? Well, let's find out. Now, because this is a preview, we can only show you footage from the first 3 stages of each of the 3 games. That's absolutely fine. It means we're going to look at the caves, the Great Wall, and the jungle level in Tomb Raider 3. First things first, there's the price. We're looking at $24.29 with a 10% reduction, and that price goes on until February the 15th. The RRP is $26.99, which isn't actually too bad when you consider you're getting 3 full games here, as well as 3 sets of DLC, and as we'll see, quite a bit of effort has been put in, and the whole thing fits into 6.1 gigs. You're getting the Unfinished Business DLC in Tomb Raider 1, the Golden Mask DLC in 2, and the Lost Artifact in Tomb Raider 3, and you can start those DLCs straight away from the main menus. Now, unlike the recent Batman releases, these are all in one package. You don't have individual icons, which is definitely welcome, and you can simply shift between the 3 games by pressing up and down from the main menu. As far as options go, well, you've got the option of quite a few things actually. Now, if you played the original Tomb Raider, you'll know that controls were very fiddly. There is an option here, rather than the tank controls of old, to use a more modern set. You can also remap the buttons for both sets of controls, but even with that said, it's still not the easiest game to control. With the modern controls, just pointing the left analog stick will have you walk in that direction. It feels more natural, makes more sense. You'll then use the left trigger to lock onto enemies, or at least to bring up your weapons, and use the right analog stick to try and track them. I think they should have added in a proper lock-on mechanic, but even so, it's still slightly superior to the older controls that had you trying to rotate Lara in the tank fashion that you saw in something like Resident Evil. What doesn't carry across quite as well with this new control method is back in the OG game, you could press right and left to essentially do sideways jumping spins. That's the only way I can think of as to describe them. And now obviously that will just have you run in that direction. So in some regards, actually, some of the controls aren't quite as good. And that is an experience you'll have across the game, is that you may find that you want to tweak the controls, and it is nice to be able to change the button configurations. I personally removed the walk button, I think in the new scheme is Y, and set that to R1 like it used to be back in the OG game. Lara's mansion is still intact. I'm not sure if I can show that in the preview though, so I'm going to avoid it. But this is a great time to start to look at those visuals. Now, I am really quite impressed by the amount of work that's been done here. Firstly, let's just look at Lara herself. Flick in between the original and the updated visuals, you can see some drastic changes in her model. She was always a little, pointy, shall we say, in the older version, and now everything's nice and smooth. The model just looks a lot cleaner and nicer. You've probably also noticed that yes, you can actually flick between the new and the old visuals with the push of a button. I love to see it. It's quite a tricky thing to code in, and I'm glad they've done it. It does also highlight some of the changes in lighting, in fact some drastic changes in that area. The thing with Tomb Raider was it was stylized in a way that actually modern graphics and lighting techniques have the potential to remove. Just take some of these scenes. Here's the original, and then side by side with the update. Do I prefer the updated visuals? Kind of. Do they also actually make the gameplay experience slightly different? They definitely do. Now, when you flick over, you're going to 60 frames per second. That's where it tends to hover, although it does fluctuate a little. And then when you flick back, it's obviously its original frame rate. This makes controlling it very different, but some of the newer lighting techniques did leave some areas feeling very, very dark. Then there's the artistic interpretation that's taken place here. The jungle level in the 3rd game is a great example of that. The original looked very similar to the first game actually, but jumping to the remaster, you've We've now got God rays coming down from the sky. It has a much more orange hue and quite a different feeling to its original release, while still maintaining mostly the same geometry. On that note, environmental geometry hasn't seen quite the update that the character models have. Understandably so, they want to keep things generally the same, but it's a little more jarring compared to that very good clean character model to have the angular straight edges on trees. So to give you a quick idea of their frame rates, let's have a look at that now. Then we can jump over to handheld mode and you can see what to expect there. It is nice playing this one in handheld, I have to say, and I think this is probably a good time to talk about an issue that I've had that hopefully I can help you with. Now, I did mention the two different control schemes. When you first play the game, it doesn't do a very good job of explaining that actually those new control schemes have entirely different methods of accessing certain moves. What I mean by that is in the OG game, let's say you wanted to grab a ledge, you would jump up, then you'd press, I think it was either X or Y, and it would grab the ledge and then you could lift yourself up. In the new one, you jump and then you have to hold one of the trigger buttons to reach her hands out to then grab the next ledge, or time that so that you press it just before you reach it. It doesn't sound like a big change, but in actuality, there was a time early on in my review experience where I thought that the controls didn't work at all. I was genuinely concerned that they completely messed it up because I couldn't make an early jump in the game, but it was because you actually had to do an extra button push, so I kept reverting to those base controls. Then there are the other more minor issues like the sideways rolling jumps, and a few of the other moves which obviously feel quite different with the new set. One area I would have loved to see them improve is the delay on jumps. If you remember, you used to have to hold a button and you'd run towards an edge and it would almost wait until you reached the edge before it would jump. Now that was in there, I think, by design, because some of the jumps required you to jump from the very edge of a platform. Unfortunately, again, with the modern controls, it just doesn't feel quite right because you're expecting it to jump the instant you press the button, and there's that little delay. It can feel a bit hit and miss. And if you're going to implement modern controls, then in my opinion, remove the walk button entirely and have a slight press on the analog stick be your walk. That's what you would have in any other game. So yeah, as far as controls go, there are a lot of changes there, but it is a bit of a mixed bag initially, at least until you figure out some of the more advanced control techniques, and it's worth making sure you do, otherwise it can feel a little frustrating. Lara's mansion seems to have some of the old controls baked into its design. So yeah, just worth mentioning, use that right trigger, it will save you all the bother. The gameplay feels mainly unchanged. The majority of it is platforming, guiding Lara through intricately designed levels, and I have to say, the levels have actually held up remarkably well. I mentioned to Glen that I actually missed the days where you were expected to figure out where to go next. The signposts weren't huge. You might find yourself sucked under a river and you're fighting for your life. You can see your oxygen dropping down and the exit is very difficult to see. Now, strangely, I actually like that. I like it because it feels like you're in a difficult environment rather than following these signposts that these days are so overt. That's not to say that all of the design's perfect, and as I say, I think the lock-on mechanics for fighting animals and creatures, they're not great. They were terrible back in the day. They feel slightly better now, but still can be a little bit awkward as you wrestle against the controls to try and lock on to that enemy. And then there's another issue I experienced whereby when you click in the right stick in the modern control scheme, that actually locks Lara in place and is designed so that you can look around in environments. But in the heat of battle, if you lock yourself still, well, you're being chased by a tiger. We can all see where this is going to go. Now that's a me problem because I panic when I fight things and end up clicking buttons I shouldn't. But another area worth noting. Now with the visuals, they have also included a photo mode. This is another great addition. You open this by clicking in both analog sticks. You can then adjust the camera to get the perfect thumbnail shot. And while I'm not necessarily someone that this would appeal to generally, it is handy for this type of thing, and it is again a sign at least that they really have put the effort in to give you the best versions of these games. Now sometimes while you're recording these previews, you miss out a few bits and bobs here and there. If there are any questions that you would like answered, things that you want to know about the game, then please do put them down in the comments and I'll make sure to, within embargo of course, answer those. The full review of this one will be out on Wednesday. I think what we can say here is that Aspyr have clearly taken the job seriously. While the controls still don't feel amazing. It's nice to have modern controls in there, and the difference between the old and the new is quite striking. I couldn't find an option to change the brightness. That's something else I think they should patch in. But at the price they're asking as well, I think it's actually a very reasonable package and it's going to appeal to a lot of people. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content, to our Patreons, our members, and as always, for all things Nintendo Switch all the time and zero rumours, keep it Switch up. See ya!